If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
Today at Horse Chats, we've got back Dr. Hayley Randle. Now, Hayley's been a regular guest before, and the last time she talked to us about horse welfare. And I just want to remind you about the podcast being brought to you by International Horse College. And the mission of International Horse College is to improve the welfare of horses around the world through the safe education of riders, handlers, and trainers. Have a look at the wide variety of horse courses now at internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. Now, I think today's chat's a little bit more about people welfare because we're going to talk to Hayley about interesting facts about COVID-19 and how it's affected horse owners. I'm sure that everyone that's a horse owner through COVID-19, the lockdowns and everything else is going to have their own stories. And I know I've got some, but I'm always really interested in the science-based research to know that there's a certain amount of people that have been surveyed and it's not just my short little world that I'm in. But Dr. Hayley Randle and CSU have done quite a lot of research into this area. So, Hayley, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh, well, Hayley, I'm very interested in how it has affected. And as I said, I come across lots of horse owners and lots of different people and how it's affected them. But I'm interested, how did this research come about?
Well, I was actually invited to be involved in this research, which was really, really timely because it was something I wanted to do anyway. So a couple of UK-based researchers, David Marlin and Jane Williams, who's from Hartbury, they were putting together a questionnaire primarily for UK-based horse owners, but also covering some areas of the US, primarily Canada. And they asked if I would be interested in sort of helping by distributing also to Australia and New Zealand. So it was really timely. They're both people that I've worked with before. In fact, Jane was one of my PhD students, so it's like the full circle, really. Yeah, so that's kind of where it all came about, and it was really quite quickly as COVID was becoming a global phenomenon that it's become. So yeah.
Okay, so the whole survey interested that someone from UK. So I was going to say, is this an Australian research or it is worldwide? Where did the team actually get the information?
Yeah, so it was a truly global project. So what we had is a specifically designed survey. So it was a very short survey designed to take no more than 5 minutes, really. The first step was to sort of make sure that in each country the wording was appropriate. So in Australia, you would have, you would talk about paddocks and yards. In the UK, you would probably talk about stables and fields. And in the US, you talk about the barn and all of those sorts of things. So there was a fair bit of work on getting the wording correct to get the sort of appropriate answers. So what we did is we sent out a survey through the SurveyMonkey system, and that went out through sort of most, horsey social media platforms. So Facebook obviously was a big one, and then everybody who completed it or had any interest sort of snowballed it. So they shared it and, shared it with friends and so on and through different social media and so on. And it went everywhere very quickly.
Wow, well, a bit viral itself. Yeah. What was the time frame then? COVID's only sort of been here for a short while, so it must have been a fairly short time frame. And yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was really, really short. So as COVID was sort of becoming recognised as a global thing, survey was put together really quickly. And then, as I said before, it was modified from different countries just in terms of the wording. The questions were actually the same. And then they were launched sort of in a sort of relatively short period of time, but not all at the same time because obviously COVID was doing its thing differently at different times. So in Australia and New Zealand, it went live between the 30th of March and the 31st of March, and then it was out until about the 2nd or the 3rd of April. So for Australia, that was just when most states were actually reaching their peak in wave one, as it turns out. So the survey was open sort of for 5 or so days in each of the different locations. Pretty representative time.
How many people did you actually get to fill in to complete the survey? Of course, people are pretty social when it comes to things like that. Yeah.
Well, that was part of the reason why we kept it short, to keep it doable. So overall, we had there were about 4,000 from the US, 6,000 from the UK. And for Australia, there were 700 or nearly 700, and just over 500 from New Zealand. So although the numbers for ANZ, seem smaller, they are smaller, but proportionally speaking, that was actually really good numbers.
Yeah, we have a smaller population as well.
Yeah, and also much more rural and not so accessible.
What did you find? What were the main findings of the survey, and how did it differ between the countries?
Yeah, so the main things really that came out from all countries were that there was a lack of, or people felt that there was a lack of official guidance. They didn't know what the right thing or the wrong thing to do was, and they also didn't necessarily know where to look to for guidance. Most people just took, I'll be a sensible approach, but that was quite a difficult sort of thing. And I think also that's a massive thing for looking forward to the future when other things like this happen. There was a lot of concern about owners' ability to access their horses. So people kind of worried that they wouldn't be able to see them at all, or even that if it's restricted access, would they have time to do things with their horses? Could they go every day? Could they go for the amount of time they needed to? And all of those sorts of things. And actually, when you look at the data, that was quite a reasonable thing to be worried about, because there were a range of different restrictions that sort of facility owners impose, which could be anything from the number of times that you go or what times you go. Can you go the same times as the people who actually jointly care for your horse? And all of those sorts of things, but also how long you could actually go for, because a lot of people, particularly in a place like Australia where your horse might be in a really big paddock, you might spend half of your allocated time actually finding your horse, never mind doing anything with them. And also, what you could and couldn't do. If you're on a facility where you have access to resources like show jumps and things like that, then a lot of that stuff that involved being touched and carried was sort of put out of bounds. There are lots of things around the sort of access, but other areas included sort of, the ability to treat your horse. So it was quite interesting that there were a lot of horses, particularly for this is a specific number for Australia and New Zealand data set. There was 77% of people said that their horse had some form of sort of issue, not mostly a medical issue, that needed some form of treatment on a very frequent basis. So that could be anything from, medication for your Cushing horses, or your horse needs to have stretches and do rehab, on a very frequent basis. And if you couldn't get there or be there for long enough, you couldn't do that. I have lots of other examples of things where, for example, horses got injured and then the people couldn't get there to treat them. And, lots of things around that. The resources, that was another big area. And that was everything that varied from, access to feed supplies and forage. Now, that's a particular Australian thing, given the bushfires and the droughts and things that have already been impacting 2020 before COVID. And also, access to vets and farriers and other sort of practitioners. So for Australia, that wasn't so bad, but for New Zealand, at some points, the farriers weren't classified as essential. So that caused a lot of concern with the New Zealand contingent. The other sort of areas, sort of two other areas, there are loads of little areas, but sort of in summary, a lot of the people who have horses actually do, believe it or not, make money out of their horses. And If they have horses that they're preparing for competition to get their values up for sale, they couldn't do that. They were worried about horse fitness and therefore their longevity. People who have horses often go to other properties and coach and teach and educate. They couldn't do that. There were some big decisions actually being made around horses. And, there were a number that were euthanized because people said that they couldn't look after them properly. It sounds extreme, but you can see how it could happen. And the other sort of area that was really, I hadn't really thought about. I was just sort of thinking science, horse welfare, my usual train of thought, around actually how useful and how important the time spent with horses actually is.
Yes, that's something that I just talking to other people and people that, like I only know, as I said, I only know my little area. I suppose I do talk to a lot of people, but people that have been in lockdown but able to get out for exercise have been able to spend more time with their horse. Now, I don't know if that's going to be negative or positive in the overall, because you've certainly, well over 10,000, 11,000 people. But tell us more, through those 11,000 people or 11,000 plus about that horse-human interaction and any related findings.
Yeah, I was surprised that how important it was to everybody, which is a really stupid thing for me to say because I know more than anybody how important it is that, I can go outside and, spend a little bit of time with my horses at each end of the day between the day job, and it just makes you feel good. But a lot of people, it was almost one of their first responses. I need to tell you how important time with my horses is. So that actually, when you unpick that a bit, that relates to their physical health. So, just the general moving around and sort of doing physical things. And that doesn't always necessarily mean riding. It could just be, walking to the paddock and, shifting things around and so on. But also, obviously, the mental health side of it. A lot of people felt that their mental health was very, very compromised, just due to the fact they couldn't spend as much time with their horses. So that was really, really interesting because a lot of people, I think, were feeling that it wasn't fair that they were being sort of had reduced access due to the facility owners putting that in place, although for obviously really important reasons. But it's the other thing I think that we kind of neglect to think about is actually a lot of these people couldn't because they then had to do other things that they don't plan to do in their day. For example, homeschooling, looking after children and sort of taking on other roles because the rest of the world seems to have gone mad and, everybody's normal day was not a normal day anymore. So some people just couldn't get to their horses because they then had a whole load of kids to look after or, that sort of thing. And I can honestly say, I know I'm here to talk about horses, but the most challenging thing for me has been the homeschooling thing. So, we're not prepared for that. We're not teachers. I'm a lecturer. I'm not a school teacher. So, that had a direct impact on us. So, yeah.
Yeah. Because when I said about people welfare, I think that was the first thing that I thought of was a horse-human interaction. But was there anything there that was unexpected? It was unexpected for you about that. But anything else that you thought was more unexpected?
Yeah, there were a few things. There were a lot of people who actually they modified what they do with their horses. So although they weren't necessarily told don't do X, Y, or Z, they decided that they would change their practices. And it wasn't just about being more more hand washing and all of that sort of thing. But a lot of people said that actually they avoided riding their young horses or horses that had just been backed and educated and so on. And they also tended not to do things like jumping, so those sort of higher risk activities. So it wasn't because they didn't have access to a show jumps on a facility, but they actually made the decision that they felt that was too risky and just a not sensible thing to do. So when you unpick the data a little bit for that, the main reason that they gave for that was that it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want to hurt themselves and end up in hospital where they may get infections or anything, but it was about they didn't want to do anything to sort of waste valuable resources. So, all the hospital and the medics should be there to treat COVID-related things rather than, some crazy horse person who's just fallen off a horse. So, that was a nice finding because it just shows how nice people can be. So, but I didn't expect that.
Well, it's responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, social responsibility, that's good, yeah.
What about people? Did anyone say, no, it doesn't affect me at all? Like I've talked to people who are on big properties that they don't talk to the rest of the world a lot of the time. Was there anyone within the survey, or were there many that weren't particularly affected?
I would say that there was probably, not a publishable statistic as such, but I would say there were about 15% of people in the Australian-New Zealand sort of grouping that actually said that nothing had really changed because they were lucky enough to have their horses at home. Because I would say that proportionally, certainly in comparison with the UK, which is the other place I know more about, a lot more people actually are able to have their horses at home here. But what was really, really nice about that was that they were really, really kind of grateful for that. Because in the questionnaire, it was basically a whole set of questions where it was sort of yes, no type answers. But the last question was an open answer, which was, is there anything else you'd like to share with us and tell us and so on. And so many of the people that actually have their horses at home sort of wrote a sentence or two about how they were really grateful that they actually had their horses at home. So nothing changed for them. And in fact, for some of them, even if the kids were at home, they could still spend more time with their horses. So they saw it as a very big positive. So that was nice. It was a nice thing about human nature that came out of all of this.
And I'm sure that everyone listening, like everyone, is going to have their own view on the thing. But because you've surveyed so many people, just go over what I can understand why this research is so important. But for someone else who just says, oh, yeah, what does that mean? It doesn't affect me. Why is this kind of research so important?
I think it's important on lots of different levels because obviously it's looking at what's happening in the here and now. And if you've got something that's being sort of looked at by some independent people, it gives you a different perspective than if you're just looking at your own situation. So that means we can collect data and we can actually build up a sort of a database to look at how things pan out in the future. I think it also is particularly important because one of the things that it's shown up is everybody was sort of not really happy about the lack of official guidance. So that's certainly a message that can go out for future sort of cases of things like this. But also, another reason I think is really, really important is that, the world seems to be getting smaller and smaller, especially with social media. And I think COVID itself has really demonstrated that, how things go pandemic. And I think we should share all of our information that we get. So by doing this on an international level, we can actually look at things that are common across the world and things that are slightly different for different areas and so on, and come up with a more informed sort of decision-making process for us for how to advise, to cope with this sort of thing in the future. And the more data you've got out there, the more you can actually start making predictions about sort of, scenarios, if you like, so that when things happen that you're more prepared.
Yeah. Now, COVID's still around. We've still got COVID. We've still got... What's coming next? Are you still doing any more research into this, any sort of follow-up research, or what are you on to next?
Yes, so the next step is round 2 of the survey, and that's designed to check out the progress from the original. So the idea is that will go out at the end of the month. So it's a set period of time on from when the first ones went out. And now, obviously, in Australia, we're looking like we're having a bit of a second wave thing going on. So we just need to modify we're not really going to change the questions too much because you won't have a direct comparison, but just make some of them a little bit more sort of looking back at what's happened over this period of time. And again, that will sort of confirm some of the previous concerns that they actually materialise. And the other thing is that the different countries have actually managed COVID, the whole sort of thing around COVID differently. So we should be seeing some trends come out from that. And the other thing that's happened quite recently, because I've just done a few little talks, mostly at Charles Sturt Uni, we actually have people from different countries, for example, South Africa, who actually are really keen on sort of having a survey done in their respective countries as well. So it's a sort of a longitudinal follow-up. So from the people who answered before hopefully can provide more info now, but also maybe expanding into different countries too. The idea then is to obviously, we're academics, so we have to publish stuff. So papers have been written. But to be honest, it's as important that the findings actually get out into the real world, into industry, to inform things that are going to make the lot of horses and horse owners, more positive.
Yes, no, I can see that. Now, if people would like to get involved in this, what's the best way? Is it through Facebook? Is there a particular place in Facebook they should go if they'd like to take part in the survey? And when did you say it was on? Towards the end of July?
It's going to be towards the end of July, yeah. So it would probably be, I think we're going to start sending them out around probably in about a week's time, actually. So certainly the last week of July. And I think the main thing is just for people to keep an eye on the sort of the local horse sites and so on. We don't actually have a specific place where it's sat at the moment, but if anybody wants to contact me directly with ideas and offers of distribution, then yeah, that would be fine. It'd be really good. Okay,
what's the best way to contact you, Hayley?
So just email really. So that's You've got that anyway, haven't you? So
I've got it, Randle at CSU. Yep, I can put that on your page, it's on all of them. So just go to horsechats.com and search for Hayley, search for Randle. You'll find that at the bottom of each page of each of your chats. You'll find those details. Yep. This has been really good. Yeah, I think lots of information here, Hayley, and lots of very current. I've just got to. I'm just looking. I'll have to juggle our guests around because we've sort of got. I was going to put this chat up next month, but I'll see if I can juggle around and get you in before that last week of July, so that people can have the opportunity to take part in the survey. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay, then. All right, looking forward to the next round of research and just to see what's changed.
Yep.
And as I said, my view is fairly small, and just what you've said here, I just think, right, people are more affected here and here and here, rather than just my view. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Okay, thank you, and looking forward to chatting again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.